I'm telling you, man, you fuckers keep a goddamn execution. There's gonna be bloodshed. I'm sick of this. Get that warrant signed.
This is Scott Dozier, who's facing charges of first-degree murder in Nevada. In 2002, Dozier lured 22-year-old Jeremiah Miller to a Las Vegas hotel room where the murder took place. The death was ruled a homicide, with the police revealing that Miller's body was dismembered. Dozier was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in 2007. In addition to Miller's murder, Dozier was also suspected of killing another man whose body was never found. Dozier reportedly bragged to a former girlfriend about killing the man. Although he was charged with murder, the case was dropped due to a lack of physical evidence. Scott says,
and so I guess maybe I do believe to some extent in an eye for eye. I mean, I know how I would respond if somebody killed somebody I loved, and I was sure they did it.
He even went as far as to say,
if Jeremiah Miller's family really thinks I killed him, they should have the opportunity to kill me.
Dozier made headlines for his request to be executed despite ongoing legal challenges to overturn his death sentence. A lack of lethal injection drugs complicated Dozier's case, as pharmaceutical companies have increasingly refused to supply drugs for executions. Nevada had planned to use a 3-drug cocktail that had never been used in the United States. This drug cocktail only raised concerns about the potential for a botched execution. They were adamant that the state did not move forward with the plan that Nevada had arranged for Scott. They argued,
they're using Mr. Dozier as a guinea pig because he's volunteered to have the state put him to death. There's just no guarantee that it would be a pain-free execution. And there are fears that it could be botched, and if that's the case, then the state will be in a lot of trouble.
What makes this all the more fascinating is while Scott was waiting for the state to make a decision, he was heard brainstorming some other ways the state could get it done.
Hey, bring back the firing squad, let's do this instead, let's do that instead. You know what I mean?
There's only 2 states that have firing squad. I don't think Nevada's going to bring back firing squad.
No, I know, that would be great, so that would be my favorite way. That would be the
I
way.
know that would be your favorite way. You idiot.
That'd be the way to go if it was up to me.
That would be great is an interesting way to describe execution by firing squad to general society, but not for Scott Dozier. However, despite his legal team insisting that the proposed method of execution was a bad idea, in court, Dozier insisted that he be executed.
My outlook on this is that personally, I'm not that concerned with it. I think once they get started, they're going to get it done one way or another. It's ideally it not be terrible and painful, but if it is, I'm kind of committed at that point.
Perhaps painful or protracted executions, that has not dissuaded you from asking me to sign this warrant in this order?
It is not. Your Honor, all the people ended up dead, and that's my goal here.
Are you sure this is what you wish me to do?
I am, yes, 100% sure.
Despite the legal challenges and delays, Dozier reiterated his desire to be executed and waived his appeals, saying he is willing to write the judge a letter every Sunday to reassure her of his certainty of his decision.
I will gladly write you a letter every single week, just letting you know nothing has changed between now and then. I'll write it every Sunday.
In 2018, a judge approved the use of the untested drug cocktail, and Dozier's execution was scheduled for November. However, the execution was ultimately delayed after one of the drug manufacturers sued to stop the use of their product in executions. Dozier's request to be executed was controversial, with some arguing that the death penalty was a just punishment for his heinous crime.
What do you say to those who say Scott was convicted of brutally murdering people and he's going to go out with a drug that's literally designed to make you not feel pain? Is that justice?
To which Scott responded,
I think it's awesome. I mean, it's killing people all over the place. You guys get pharmaceutical-grade fentanyl and just bang me up, man. Use a shit ton.
Others have pointed out the potential for wrongful convictions and the ethical concerns surrounding the use of the death penalty. However, despite all of the drama and controversy over Scott's plea for the death penalty, none of it even mattered, because in early 2019, at just 48 years, Dozier was found dead in his cell in an apparent suicide.
The Nevada death row inmate who had been awaiting his execution for over a decade has taken matters into his own hands. Scott Dozier was found dead this afternoon in an apparent suicide. Dozier, a convicted killer, had his execution delayed 2 times after it was caught in the middle of a legal battle between the makers of the lethal injection drug.
As you can see, Dozier wanted to exit this world by all means. However, this wasn't the only time a convict wanted the death penalty. There was also the case of Aileen Wournos, the world's first ever female serial killer. This is Aileen Wournos.
If it was a horrendous crime, why didn't I shoot them between the eyes, cut their off, stick it in their mouth, do all kinds of gross stuff?
Who is facing charges of multiple murders in Florida. Aileen Wournos was an American serial killer who gained notoriety in the 80s and 90s for murdering 7 men in Florida.
It sounds like you've been betrayed by everyone.
That's right, I was. That's why I don't care if I'm executed and leave this planet.
Wournos claimed that the men had sexually assaulted or attempted to sexually assault her while she worked as a sex worker. Wournos' childhood was marked by abuse and neglect. She had a history of criminal behavior and drug use. She was maltreated and molested as a teen and got pregnant at 14. Wournos began working as a sex worker in her early 20s.
She was seeing that she could use her body, her sexuality, to gain favors from others, and she was enjoying the attention she was getting.
Wournos was arrested in 1991 after the police tracked her to a sleazy biker's bar. She initially denied involvement in the murders, but eventually confessed to killing 7 men.
Yeah.
You killed 7 men.
Yes, sure
And I'm
did.
asking you, what got you to kill the 7
And I'm
men?
telling you because the cops let me keep killing them, Nick. Don't you get it?
At her trial, Wournos, whom the media nicknamed the Damsel of Death and the Highway Hooker, claimed that the murders were in self-defense.
I know I was raped, and you ain't nothing but a bunch of scum.
Therefore, these proceedings are now
Putting
concluded.
somebody who was to death.
Still, the prosecution argued that she had killed the men for money or other alternative motives. They brought in her partner, Tyria Moore, the star witness who testified against her.
I met her in a bar, sitting on the floor watching TV, and she just come out and said, "I have something to tell you." And I asked her what, and she said that she had shot and killed a man that day.
In 2001, Wournos petitioned the Florida Supreme Court requesting to be executed. Wournos' request for execution was controversial, with some arguing that she should be spared the death penalty due to her traumatic childhood and history of mental illness. Despite controversies surrounding her case, Wournos remained steadfast in her desire to be executed.
Nick, this is the last time I'm going to say it. You have to kill Aileen Wournos because she'll kill again.
However, her request for a quick execution was not granted, and her case was appealed multiple times over the years. Wournos' case was also complicated by questions about her mental state and competence. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and schizophrenia and had a history of hallucinations and delusions. However, she was deemed competent to stand trial. Wournos' case has been the subject of several books and films, including the 2003 film Monster, which starred Charlize Theron as Wournos. The film received critical acclaim and won several awards, including an Academy Award for Theron's performance. Wournos was convicted of 6 counts of first-degree murder and executed by lethal injection in 2002, becoming the 10th woman executed in the United States since the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976. Her case continues to be controversial and has sparked ongoing debates about the use of the death penalty and the treatment of women in the criminal justice system. Wournos had a tough childhood, and her crimes can be traced to her abusive upbringing. However, that wasn't exactly the case for Stephen Lorenzo. This is Stephen Lorenzo, who is facing charges for multiple homicides in Tampa Bay, Florida. The police said Lorenzo and accomplice Scott Schweikert collaborated to torture and murder Jason Galehouse and Michael Wachholtz in his Seminole Heights home almost 2 decades ago. The killings, which occurred over consecutive nights in December 2003, horrified the Tampa Bay area and raised fears of a serial killer targeting the queer community. Lorenzo and Schweikert lured the victims to Lorenzo's home after getting them drunk at a bar. Little did the victims know, this would be the last house they entered conscious. Galehouse's cause of death was a blunt force to the head, and it was later ruled as a homicide. Without getting into too much detail, after Lorenzo and Schweikert were done, they used an electric saw to help place parts in trash bins throughout Tampa. Wachholz's body was abandoned in the back of his Jeep Cherokee at an apartment complex in West Hillsborough County. DNA from both men was found on items retrieved from searches of Lorenzo's home and garage, and photos of the crimes taking place were also discovered. In 2006, Lorenzo was sentenced to 200 years in federal prison for related crimes, but has spent the last 5 years in Hillsborough County Jail while his state murder case was pending. At the penalty hearing, prosecutors presented evidence that proved not only were the victims' lives taken, but they were also mistreated and physically overpowered before their deaths. Lorenzo, who was representing himself in court for the past 6 years, reiterated his desire for the death penalty during the hearing.
First off, I'd like to thank Mr. Gonzalez, Mr. Sonardi, and everybody else that was part of the defense team. They were absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And to the judge, I want to thank you because you have had incredible tolerance and patience and fairness to me. I'm seeking the death penalty. It's in my best interest, basically because it's a comfort. I'll be living a lot more comfortable than I would in the federal system.
Lorenzo's guilty plea to 2 counts of first-degree murder came as a surprise, as did his refusal to present evidence or testimony that could have weighed against capital punishment. Judge Christopher Sabella accepted Lorenzo's plea and sentenced him to death after determining that it was made voluntarily and intelligently. Prosecutors presented significant evidence during the recent penalty hearing, including testimony from Scott Schweikert, who was serving a life sentence for his role in the murders. Schweikert described how he and Lorenzo had developed a depraved fantasy to kidnap, enslave, and torture men of the LGBTQ community. After tiring of their victims, they planned to either sell them or kill them. Lorenzo declined to argue against a death sentence. Still, his court-appointed lawyers submitted information indicating that he suffered from various disorders and had experienced childhood abuse and adult relationship trauma. However, Judge Sabella found that this information did not significantly affect his decision. He echoed the words of Gail House's mother, who testified earlier, "From one Italian to another, ti condono a morte," Sabella said. That translates to, "I sentence you, Mr. Lorenzo, to death. That is the punishment that you deserve for these horrific crimes."
In the words of Miss Pam Williams, "From one Italian to another, ti condanno a morte." That translates to, "I sentence you, Mr. Lorenzo, to death. That is the punishment that you deserve for these horrific crimes."
Lorenzo was sentenced to death for what Judge Sabella called the horrific crimes. Lorenzo was accused of living in a fantasy world due to his statements. However, Gary Gilmore, a notorious murderer who demanded to be executed, picked the execution method and received what many viewed as just punishment for his crimes. This is Gary Gilmore, who is facing charges of murder in Utah. Gary was a notorious criminal who committed 2 murders in Utah in 1976. He demanded his own execution and refused to appeal his death sentence. Gilmore's crimes were brutal and senseless. On July 19, 1976, he robbed and murdered Max Jensen, a gas station attendant in Provo, Utah. 2 days later, he killed Benny Bushnell, a motel manager in Salt Lake City. Gilmore was arrested shortly after the second murder and quickly confessed to both crimes. During his trial, Gilmore's defense argued that he was mentally unstable and should not be sentenced to death. However, Gilmore himself refused to cooperate with his lawyers and repeatedly demanded that he be executed. He even fired his lawyers and announced that he would represent himself during his sentencing hearing. Despite his lawyers' protests and his family's objections, Gilmore's wish for execution was granted. He was sentenced to death and sent to Utah State Prison to await his execution. During his time on death row, Gilmore granted interviews to the media and became a celebrity of sorts. His story was the subject of several books and a made-for-TV movie. Gilmore's execution was carried out by firing squad on January 17, 1977. It was the first execution in the United States in over a decade. In fact, Gilmore became the first person to be executed in the United States after the Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976.
Gilmore wanted to be executed and chose the firing squad instead of hanging.
I simply accepted a sentence that was given to me. I've accepted sentences all my life.
His execution sparked a renewed debate over the death penalty. Some people hailed Gilmore as a hero for his willingness to accept his punishment. In contrast, others condemned him for his crimes and the attention he received. If you think requesting the death sentence is outrageous, you need to see the most dangerous convict's reaction to the death sentence.